the middle of nowhere. Then he says he wakes up at like 7 o'clock in the morning because he has to go to his job to get some payroll thing. So he tries to wake Dylan up to ask him if he wants to go with him for the
Mamma tinha dito daqui a mais uma vez para o empate que é o final do canal do YouTube chamei a atenção. Já tive infinitas notificações para mais vídeos futuros.
ride. And he said that Dylan didn't want to go, he wanted to sleep. His dad leaves the house at 7:30. And that would be the last time he ever sees his child. His dad then comes home at like 11:30 and notices that Dylan isn't there. What do you think he does when he finds that out?
This case is definitely one that I don't think I'll ever forget. 30-year-old Swedish journalist Kim Wall was brutally murdered while she was beneath the ocean in a submarine. Kim was an independent journalist who traveled for work all the time, and she went to a number of dangerous places in the world, and nothing ever happened to her until August 10th, 2017. Kim interviewed 47-year-old Peter Madsen, who was an engineer that constructed his own submarine. She was intrigued by his skills and intelligence like many others and thought it would be a great opportunity to write about him. On August 10th, Kim and Peter boarded the submarine off the coast of Copenhagen, and this picture gives me chills because this is the last time anyone saw Kim again. Kim and her boyfriend sent a few texts back and forth until Kim stopped responding, so he reported her missing that night. At this point, no one had heard from Kim and Peter for hours, so people thought that something terrible had happened to them. The next day, Peter's submarine finally returned to the harbor, and this is Peter coming out. And do you see the blood on his nose? Well, he came out and Kim was not with him. Peter had told police that he dropped Kim off somewhere nearby in the middle of the night, but after they checked surveillance footage, they realized that he was lying. He then changed the story and told investigators that Kim had an accident in the submarine and hit her head against the hatch and passed away, so he threw her body in the ocean. Well, a month later, a cyclist found Kim's torso on a beach, and not long after, the rest of her body was found in garbage bags. When the autopsy was done, they discovered that there was no blunt force trauma to her skull, which means that Peter was lying again. Kim was stabbed 14 times near her genitals, and her cause of death was strangulation. After further investigating Peter, they revealed that he fantasized about hurting women, and they believe that this was in his first time. Peter was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. I watched the full documentary on Crave. If you guys want to go check it out, this is what it's called.
This couple went missing after getting into an argument with their landlord. But during the investigation, he disappeared too. Camden Sylvia and Michael Sullivan lived in a large $300 a month rent stabilized loft at 76 Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan, New York. Camden worked at a real estate office, and Michael was an actor who worked at an art gallery. Their landlord was Robert Rodriguez, who owned the apartment building as well as a locksmith shop on the ground floor. The couple often argued with Robert over the lack of heat in their apartment. In November of 1997, Robert was having financial problems and was going to increase rent for all of his that would have equaled 10 times the amount Camden and Michael were paying. Robert threatened to completely turn off the heat if the couple didn't agree to the rent increase. So on November 7, 1997, the couple gave Robert a petition to withhold rent if he went through with his threats that was signed by other tenants. And that evening, Camden and Michael went out for a quick jog, but they were never seen again. A few days went by, and when Camden's mom hadn't heard from her, she went to the apartment. She didn't have a key, but she was let in by a neighbor. Their apartment looked normal, their wallets and passports were there, but the only thing that was missing was the couple's running shoes and one set of keys. It looked like they had planned to be right back. Camden's mom reported this to the police, who immediately started an investigation. Police tried to get Robert to give them the keys to the building so that they could search the basement and other areas of the building for the couple, but Robert was gone. He seemingly vanished for 10 whole days, and when he finally returned, he lawyered up and refused to cooperate with investigators. He also initially refused to let authorities search his large property in upstate Orange County, New York. From what I read, they later searched by helicopter, but apparently couldn't see anything. Authorities searched what they could, but found no trace of the couple. But then, out of nowhere, Robert sold the apartment building. Police heavily searched the building, bringing in cadaver dogs and even tearing up the floors, but they still didn't find anything. But during the investigation into Robert, authorities found that he was using a dead man's identity to commit fraud. He was arrested on tax fraud charges and pleaded guilty to larceny, and he actually spent almost 6 years in prison until he was released in 2004. Adding to this, an associate of Robert, David King, who was also a co-defendant in a lawsuit with him, mysteriously vanished after getting into a heated argument with Robert back in 1991. David has also never been found. Robert has always denied any involvement in these disappearances and was last reported to be living in the East Harlem neighborhood of New York City.
Alright, so here's some childhood photos of famous killers. Number 1, we have this witch. If you don't know who this is Jodi Arias in high school. Years later, in 2008, she would become one of the most infamous criminals in US history. She murdered her ex-boyfriend Travis Alexander by stabbing him around 27 times. She testified saying she did it through self-defense, even though there are pictures that were accidentally taken by a camera during the attack. And if you don't know what guilty looks like, you will after watching these videos of her.
As the jury gets ready to consider a possible death sentence. It was filmed just after her 2008 arrest, and it's a very different side of the woman we saw in court.
Number 2, we have this ugly kid in a dress. My god, does he look like a 40-year-old midget. If you can't guess who this is, this devil's incarnate eventually becomes one of the most infamous serial killers in California, Richard Ramirez. What makes this man so frightening is that he would choose his victims randomly and murder them in the most gruesome way possible. Despite all his violent crimes, he still managed to get married to a woman in prison, and by the time of his death at age 53, he was engaged with another woman.
And tan and young and lovely. New York. Camden went to the real estate. Girl from Ipanema goes walking and she passes each one.
Now, a lot of people have been tagging me in this video, so I'm here to explain the backstory to this whole thing. This is the disturbing case of the Lululemon murder. Now, Lululemon is a billion-dollar company that specializes in very high-quality fitness clothing. But they will only be looking at one Lululemon store. This incident